Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to the southern and the northern edges of the Atlantic Ocean. In fact, I just come back from Svalbard. I have been there for a couple of days, where you can really see the visible loss of glaciers, and you can see how climate change is actually acting. And there it becomes really obvious that international collaboration is absolutely necessary to cover and to address these very large challenges for science. On the other hand, it is also an area of intense economical development, or plans for economical development, and therefore there is a great interest also from economy to actually see what's going to happen in the Arctic Ocean. It is less so in the Antarctic, but even there we need to look what is happening. EU-PolarNet will help to set the agenda for future polar research, for integrated polar research. How can we bring together the agendas of many different countries to really address these challenges which are ahead of us? We will bring together science and stakeholders, and we will bring together the scientific groupings in many different countries. One partner here in Europe who plays a very important role is the European Polar Board, which is already a group which has access to all European players in the field of polar research, and so this will enlarge our EU-PolarNet group by far. But let's start with the ambition. Although the research for polar aspects is already quite well connected, especially in respect to infrastructure, we are still having our national plans, and we are still working on individual agendas. And therefore it is really important to bring it together, not at least because it is very expensive to do the polar research. So our aim is to strengthen and improve the international cooperation within Europe, but also across, especially focusing on Canada and the US. But I think there are other partners around which also should be included and will be included as associated partners in the future. It is not only focusing on the Arctic, but also on the Antarctic. And therefore it is important to also consider the states which are in the Southern Ocean active. And this will, by nature, increase the collaboration which we have here in the EU-PolarNet agenda. We would like to also enhance this infrastructure access. This is the most important part of our research, and we have to make better use of the available ship capacities, aeroplanes, polar stations. So how can we actually develop an access possibility and also find financial solutions that we will share these very expensive assets? And last but not least, and that's what I already mentioned in the start, stakeholder dialogue will be very important. It would be dangerous if we are developing a science agenda which is uncoupled from the economic agenda or from a political agenda. So the stakeholders which we will have to address here will range from policy to industry and also to civil society, because people are very concerned what is happening in the polar oceans. So who are we? And we are together 17 countries represented from the European part, 22 international institutions which are involved, and if we put that together, this is really the world's largest consortium of expertise and infrastructure for polar research. If we then link to the US and to Canada, this is impressive, and this is also necessary to really tackle the challenges which are ahead of us. Now, we tried to bring everyone on board, and this long list are the cooperation partners. These are sort of associated to EU-PolarNet, and you see there a lot of international organizations which are already dealing with Arctic or Antarctic research, and it is important to bring the developments and the strategic papers which have been developed, for instance, by SCAR or by IASC together. We will consider all these different agendas and try to work on a common agenda, align these agendas to come up with a suggestion, how can we actually study the Arctic and the Antarctic in a concerted way. The blue ones here are our Canadian and US-American partners with which we collaborate, ArcticNet, then the Arctic Science Partnership, the University of Manitoba, the Canadian Polar Commission, and the study of environmental Arctic change search in the US. These are the goals. One, the foremost goal, I would say, is the strategic framework to prioritize science and to make the optimize the use of the polar infrastructure. If we can come up with an idea on how we can really bring these different national activities together, we will make a great step forward. The second point is a co-design of polar research agendas. So that is a co-design between science and society. I'm specifically saying society because it's not only industry. There are many other players in the field which we have to consider. We also have a much higher degree of coordination. I mean, even research which is outside a sort of coordinated by the European Union coordinated research agenda, but to coordinate also those nationally funded initiatives and make them more accessible. And a thing which we still have to learn, I think, in science is how can we get all relevant actors in the field together. This is the way EU-PolarNet is structured. We have science, we have the infrastructure, and we have the stakeholders, and there are 4 work packages which are addressing these different fields and which try to actually bind the whole thing together so that science and infrastructure, the science plan and the infrastructure fit together, and that it actually serves the needs of the stakeholders. I will now go briefly through the 4 different work packages just to show what is being planned. The first work package, which is led by Germany, that is mainly to look at the management and also to look at the integration of the whole consortium. But here we also have the international cooperation, so the link to the Canadian colleagues and the colleagues from the US. And therefore, in this work package, we have the task 1.3, which is led by AMAP and by IPEF in France. And this is the work package which will look mainly at the international transatlantic cooperation. Here we will have a close look at international polar activities, scan them, and find out communalities. We would also include other partners which are outside the EU and the transatlantic partnerships to actually make sure that we don't oversee things which are very important and happening outside this EU-PolarNet community. Then we will, of course, include our US and Canadian partners in all activities. We have already close contacts, and they will be increased, and I'm sure we will develop jointly research programs. Transparency, regular informing everyone is, of course, a very important part. And we will provide a platform for exchange and provide a platform for development of new ideas. Finally, we would like to come to long-term agreements with our partners so that this is not only a short-term activity of goodwill, but that we can actually come up with sustaining international cooperation. This is particularly important when we look at sustaining observation systems, so that we have data which will carry forward for a long time and give us ideas about how the system is changing and how we are actually improving our models. EU-PolarNet only started in March this year, but we already have been active before. There was in Tromsø a Transatlantic cooperation workshop, and 3 potential research issues were identified, and they will be funded in Horizon 2020, together with Canadian and US partners. And when the Arctic Science Summit Week in Toyama in Japan will come up in April, we will also link there with our Japanese colleagues. Work Package 2 is focusing on the science, so how to actually develop an integrated European polar research program, how to improve modeling and monitoring, and I just mentioned this before. We have to have a stable observation basis, and that is something which I personally find extremely important. We need to identify key parameters which need to be measured over a long time, and they need to be comparable between different nations. We can go a long way without much money, but we have to agree what we need to measure. And then we will, of course, develop research priorities which are of particular relevance for Europe, and again, make a dialogue between the stakeholders which are needing our science. Led by BAS, British Antarctic Survey in the UK, we have this work package dealing with the infrastructure. Infrastructure access and joint use is here the main topic. How can we develop processes to have access to infrastructure from other nations? Data infrastructure is also very important, how to have access to data and to store them. And satellite images and other space-based assets are another point which we have to look at. And interaction with business, who are also running research and who have infrastructure which can be used, ranging from research vessels to monitoring stations. This will be another part to find out how can we link with infrastructure from industry. Just a picture to show you which infrastructures are available already in the Arctic and the Antarctic. I'm sure you can't see this very well, but you see all these little red dots. These red dots are seasonal stations, and the dark ones are year-round stations, which you cannot see right now, but this will be later on visible, I think, in the distribution of the slides. Square ones are from the EU-PolarNet partner countries, and round ones are from non-partner countries. And most of these little dots are from partner countries which are not yet in the EU-PolarNet. So we will have to do some work to integrate them as well. And you also see that most of these dots are red and not gray or green. So year-round observation is a problem. That's something which we also have to address. Then, led by Italy, we have the stakeholder work package. This is the work package which will connect with relevant stakeholders in the polar regions and try to develop meaningful interactions. There's no point when the scientists develop a research plan, and it is of no use to the society. So we will have to have a cross-check with the stakeholders, with the users of our science, to find out which type of science and in which way the science has to be done to be of any use for them. The approach of EU-PolarNet is we have input from national research projects, from SCAR and IASC as the biggest international research organizations for polar research, and from national research plans, in order to develop an alignment of these plans and to find out what are actually the priorities. Connection with stakeholders and end users and with other transatlantic and international partners will help to refine the research plans, and finally the output will be an alignment of research plans for polar research for European society and policy and for public and decision makers. Now, unfortunately, our Canadian and US partners couldn't come today, but we have comments of our partners who have a strong support for EU-PolarNet. They will contribute actively. We are already discussing how we can do things most smoothly, and we are really looking forward to developing joint plans and giving life to this actually very nice vision. Thank you very much.